Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story. Welcome to Sue pretending to know what she's doing because she uploaded this without the race and the intro because he's a genius and he's having a very rough day. Please be patient with her because she's having a very rough day. It's been a long day. I don't feel good. My head hurts. I am nauseous. I am calling it a day. I wish I could call it a day tomorrow, but I have to work half a day, so I'm not complaining because we're doing fun things in the evening, so. But I'm tired, and I'm complaining and rambling, so ignore me. Shout out. That's what I'm doing. I forgot what I was doing there for a minute. You have to keep me in the game. Don't mind me. Alright, so shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. And dolphins, there you all are as dolphins. Maybe if my camera will focus. Focus, camera. There we go. And then we gotta start. Then we gotta find the names. Focus. There's Intrepid, Pugwall, Barry, Mayhem, Popcorn, Jerry, Betty, Lakeshore, Mazda, Ford, Jojo, 757, Mike, Cinephile, Scott. There's Hillbillies. There's Vaughn, Peach, Eastad, April, Mary, Live and Love, Craze, Tay Weezing. Mary's currently in the lead. She's a pretty blue dolphin. There's a purple dolphin. Two shades of purple there. There's Sunrise. There's Butterall. Focus. Marketplace. Will you stop fading in and out? I swear. Moon, Lower, Big Ben, S-Space. Mike. Oh, it's going to be Mike. Hang on. Oh, Black Dolphin. I don't know what to say about that, Mike. Alright. Alright, there's Mr. Mike and his Chaotic Gardens, who says he loves gardening. He's found a turkey. We found some turkeys. Turkey. Oh, that is not what I told you to do. Stop doing that. Okay. So we found turkey. Look at that turkey. That's a very cool turkey. He has a squirrel that visits his garden very often. He got a hummingbird feeder. Here's some shorts of his birds and bird feeder. No, look, there's a squirrel friend I was telling you about. No lies. So check him out. Like, share, comment, and have a good day. Alright. Right there. I'll be a historian is going to tell you guys some history, and I'm going to go soak because my head hurts and I don't feel good.
Go ahead and soak. I will try to amuse them with some minor detail. On June the 11th in 1936, interestingly enough, a fellow by the name of Edwin Armstrong would demonstrate the use of FM broadcasting to an audience of engineers at the FCC in Washington, D.C. at the time. For those of you who know that I'm an old fart, I remember the days when you used to be able to do cassette tapes on music being played over the radio. It was a fun time burning your own tapes because, you know, I was not flush with money as a kid. What? So I couldn't buy records and CDs and all sorts of fun stuff. But I could, you know, if I heard a song was going to be coming on, I'd throw a blank cassette in the dual deck, hit record, and try to catch them before the guy started blabbing off on the tape. Now, this particular fellow, Edwin Armstrong, was kind of an industry genius. He would invent multiple units, frequency modulation radios, super heterodyne receiver systems, the Armstrong oscillator, the Armstrong phase modulator, the regenerative circuit. He would get a Medal of Honor, the Holly Medal, the Franklin Medal, the AIEE Edison Medal, and even the Washington Award. Now, his big fields were for radio frequency and engineering. He was born in 1890 in New York City, and he also served in World War I from 1917 to 1919 in the Army as a major in the U.S. Army Signal Corps. He won the Legion of Honor Award. He would actually hold a total of 42 patents, getting numerous awards. The first Medal of Honor Award awarded by the Institute of Radio Engineers, now the IEEE, the French Legion of Honor, and he would achieve the rank of major in the U.S. Army Signal Corps during World War I and was often referred to as Major Armstrong during his career. He would be inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, included in the International Telecommunications Union roster of great inventors. He would also be inducted into the Wireless Hall of Fame posthumously in 2001, attended Columbia University and serves as a professor there for most of his life. Now, for his early life, Edwin Howard Armstrong was born in December 18th, 1890, in Chelsea, New York City, the oldest of 3 children. His father began working at a young age at the American branch of Oxford University Press, which published Bibles and standard classical works, eventually advancing to the position of vice president. His parents first met at the North Presbyterian Church, located on 31st Street and 9th Avenue. His mother's family had strong ties to Chelsea and with an active role in church functions. And when the church moved north, the Smiths and Armstrongs followed, and in 1895, the Armstrong family moved from their brownstone row house at 347 West 29th Street to a similar house at 26 West 97th Street on the Upper West Side. The family was comfortably middle class. By the age of 8, Armstrong contracted Sydenham's cholera, then known as St. Vitus's dance, an infrequent but serious neurological disorder precipitated by rheumatic fever. The rest of his life, Armstrong was afflicted with a physical tic exasperated by excitement or stress. Due to this illness, he withdrew from public school and home tutored for 2 years. To improve his health, the Armstrong family moved to a house overlooking the Hudson River at 1032 Warburton Avenue in Yonkers. The family subsequently moved next door, the Smith family, and Armstrong's tic at the time missed from school led to him becoming socially withdrawn. And from an early age, Armstrong showed an interest in electrical and mechanical devices, particularly trains, and he loved heights and constructed a makeshift backyard antenna tower that included a bus's chair for hoisting himself up and down in length to the concern of neighbors. Much of his early research was conducted in the attic of his parents' house. Sounds like a kid that liked to get outside. In 1909, Armstrong enrolled at Columbia University in New York City, where he became a member of the Epsilon chapter of the Theta Chi engineering fraternity and studied under Professor Michael Pupin at the Hartley Laboratories, a separate research unit at Columbia. Another of his instructors, Professor John H. Moorcroft, later remembered Armstrong as being intensely focused on the topics that interested him, but sometimes indifferent to the rest of his studies. Who isn't? Armstrong challenged conventional wisdom and was quick to question the opinions of both professors and peers. In one case, he recounted how he tricked a visiting professor from Cornell that he disliked into receiving a severe electrical shock. He also stressed that the practical over the theoretical, stating that progress was more likely the product of experimentation and reasoning than on mathematical calculation and the formula of mathematical physics. Armstrong graduated from Columbia in 1913, earning an electrical engineering degree. World War I came along, and he served as a single corps as a captain and later a major. Following college graduation, he received a $600 one-year appointment at a laboratory assistant in Columbia, after which he nominally worked as a research assistant for the salary of $1 a year under the professor. Unlike most engineers, Armstrong never became a corporate employee. He set up a self-financed independent research and development laboratory at Columbia and owned his patents outright. In 1934, he filled the vacancy left by John H. Moorcroft's death, receiving an appointment as a professor of electrical engineering at Columbia, a position he held for the remainder of his life. Now, Armstrong began working on his first major invention while he was still an undergraduate at Columbia. In late 1906, Lee DeForest had invented a three-element triode grid-Adrian vacuum tube. Now, how vacuum tubes worked was not understood at the time, and DeForest's initial auditions did not have a high vacuum and developed a blue glow at a modest plate voltage. DeForest improved the vacuum for Federal Telegraph. By 1912, the vacuum tube operation was understood and regenerative circuits using high vacuum tubes were appreciated. While growing up, Armstrong had experimented with early temperamental gas ions. Spurred by the later discoveries, he developed a keen interest in gaining a detailed scientific understanding of how vacuum tubes worked. In conjunction with Professor Moorcroft, he used a oscillograph to conduct comprehensive studies. His breakthrough discovery was determining that employing positive feedback, also known as regeneration, produced amplification hundreds of times greater than the previously attained, with the amplified signals now strong enough so that receivers could use loudspeakers instead of headphones. Further investigation revealed that when the feedback was increased beyond a certain level, the vacuum tube would go into oscillation, thus could also be used as a continuous wave radio transmitter. Well, beginning in 1913, Armstrong prepared a series of comprehensive demonstrations and papers that carefully documented his research, and in the late 1913 applied for a patent protection covering the regenerative circuit. On October 6, 1914, the U.S. patent was issued for his discovery. Although Lee DeForest initially discounted Armstrong's findings, beginning in 1915, DeForest filed a series of competing patent applications that largely copied Armstrong's claims, now stating he had discovered the regeneration first based on a notebook entry made on August 6, 1912, while working for the Federal Telegraph Company prior to his date recognized for Armstrong of January 31, 1913. The result was an interference hearing at the Patent Office to determine priority. DeForest was not the only other inventor involved. The four competing claimants included Armstrong, DeForest, General Electric's Langmuir, and Alexander Messner, who was a German national, which led his application being seized by the Office of Alien Property Custodian during World War I. Following the end of World War I, Armstrong enlisted representation of the law firm Penny, Davis, Martin, and Edmonds. To finance his legal expenses, he began issuing non-transferable licenses for use of regenerative patents to a select group of small radio equipment firms, and on November 20th, 17 companies had been licensed. These licenses paid 5% royalties on their sales, which were restricted only to amateurs and experimenters. Meanwhile, Armstrong explored his options for selling the commercial rights for his work. Although the obvious candidate was the Radio Corporation of America, on October 5, 1920, the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company took out an option for $335,000 for the commercial rights to both the regenerative and superheterodyne patents, which an additional $200,000 would be paid if Armstrong prevailed in his regenerative patent dispute. Westinghouse exercised this option on November the 4th, 1920. Well, legal proceedings related to the regenerative patent became separated into two groups of court cases. An initial court action, which was triggered in 1919 when Armstrong sued the Forest Company in district court, alleging infringement of the patent, and this court ruled in Armstrong's favor on May 17, 1921. A second line of court cases, the result of the Patent Office interference hearing, had a different outcome. The Interference Board also had sided with Armstrong, but was unwilling to settle with the DeForest for less than what he considered full compensation. Thus, pressured, DeForest continued his legal defense and appealed the Interference Board decision at the District of Columbia District Court. On May 8, 1924, the court ruled that DeForest, who should be considered regeneration's inventor, Armstrong, along with much of the engineering community, was shocked by these events, and he side appealed this decision. All the legal proceedings twice went before the U.S. Supreme Court in 1924 and 1934. He was unsuccessful in overturning the decision. In response to the second Supreme Court decision upholding DeForest as the inventor of the regeneration, Armstrong attempted to return his 1917 IRE Medal of Honor, which had been awarded in recognition of his work and publications dealing with the action of oscillating and non-oscillating audio. The organization's board refused to allow him and issued a statement that strongly affirms the original award. Now, the U.S. entered World War I in 1917. Later that year, Armstrong was commissioned as a captain of the Signal Corps and assigned to a laboratory in Paris, France, to help develop radio communications for the Allied war effort. He returned to the U.S. in the autumn of 1919 after being promoted to the rank of major. During both World Wars, Armstrong gave the U.S. military free use of his patents. During this period, Armstrong's most significant accomplishment was the development of a supersonic heterodyne, soon shortened to superheterodyne, radio receiver circuit. The circuit made radio receivers more sensitive and selective and is used extensively today. The key feature of the superheterodyne approach is the mixing of incoming radio signal with the locally generated different frequency signal within a radio set. That circuit is called the mixer. The result is a fixed, unchanging intermediate frequency, or IF signal, which is easily amplified and detected by the following circuit stages. In 1919, Armstrong filed an application for a U.S. patent for the superheterodyne circuit, which was issued the next year. The patent was subsequently sold to Westinghouse. The patent was challenged, triggering another Patent Office interference hearing. Armstrong ultimately lost this patent battle, although the outcome was less controversial than the involving of the regeneration proceedings. The challenger was Lucien Levy of France, who had worked developing the Allied radio communications during World War I. He had been awarded French patents in 1917 and 1918 that covered some of the same basic ideas that Armstrong's superheterodyne receiver. AT&T, interested in radio development at this time, primarily for point-to-point extensions of its wired telephone exchanges, purchased the U.S. rights to Levy's patent and contested Armstrong's grant. The subsequent court reviews continued until 1928, when the District of Columbia Court of Appeals disallowed all 9 claims of Armstrong's patent, assigning priority for 7 of the claims to Levy and 1 each to Ernst Alexanderson of General Electric and Burton W. Kendall of Bell Laboratories. It's almost like they want to walk around the guy and not even talk to him. What? Although most early radio receivers used regeneration, Armstrong approached RCA's David Sarnoff, who they had known since giving a demonstration of the regeneration receiver in 1913, about the corporation offering superheterodynes as a superior offering to the general public. The ongoing patent dispute was not a hindrance because extensive cross-licensing agreements signed in 1920 and 21 between RCA, Westinghouse, and AT&T meant that Armstrong could freely use the Levy patent. Superheterodyne sets were initially thought to be prohibitively complicated and expensive, as the initial designs required multiple tuning knobs and used 9 vacuum tubes. In conjunction with the Harry Hauck and RCA engineers, Armstrong developed a simpler, more time-saving design. The RCA introduced the superheterodyne radiola sets in the U.S. markets in early 1924, and they were an immediate success, dramatically increasing the corporate's profits. These sets were considered so valuable that RCA would not license the superheterodyne to other U.S. companies until 1930. Now, the regeneration legal battle had one serendipitous outcome for Armstrong. While he was preparing the apparatus to counteract a claim made by a patent attorney, he accidentally ran into the phenomenon of superregeneration, where, by rapidly quenching the vacuum tube oscillations, he was able to achieve even greater levels of amplification. A year later, in 1922, Armstrong sold his superregeneration patent to RCA for $200,000 plus 60,000 shares of corporation stock, which was later increased to 80,000 shares. In payment for consulting services, this made Armstrong's RCA's largest shareholder, and he noted that the sale of the invention was to net me more than the sale of regenerative circuit and the superheterodyne combined. RCA envisioned selling a line of superregenerative receivers until superheterodyne sets could be perfected for general sales, but it turned out the circuit was not selective enough to make it practical for broadcast receivers. Now, static interference, extraneous noises caused by sources still like thunderstorms and electrical equipment or Joe being near them, bedeviled early radio communications using amplitude modulation and perplexed numerous inventors attempting to eliminate it. These are the joys of AM radio. Many ideas for static elimination were investigated with little success, and in the mid-1920s, Armstrong began researching a solution. He initially and unsuccessfully attempted to resolve the problem by modifying the characteristics of AM transmissions. One approach used frequency modulation, or FM transmissions, and instead of varying the strength of the carrier wave with the AM, the frequency of the carrier was changed to represent the audio signal. In 1922, John Ranchaw Carson of AT&T, inventor of the single sidebar modulation, had published a detailed mathematical analysis that showed FM transmissions did not provide any improvement over AM. Although Carson's bandwidth rule for FM is important today, Carson's view turned out to be incomplete, as he had analyzed only what is now known as narrowband FM. In early 1928, Armstrong began researching the capabilities of FM, and although there were others involved in the FM research at the time, he knew as an RCA project to see if FM shortwave transmissions were less susceptible to fading than AM. In 1931, the RCA engineers constructed a successful FM shortwave link transmitting the Schmeling-Stribling first flight broadcast from California to Hawaii, and noted at the time that the signal seemed to be less affected by static. The project made little further progress. Working in secret in the basement of the laboratory of Columbia's Philosophy Hall, Armstrong developed a wideband FM, with the process discovering significant advantages over the earlier narrowband transmitted. In a wideband FM system, the deviations of the carrier frequency are made to be much larger in the frequency of the audio signal, which can be shown to provide better noise rejection. He was granted the U.S. patents, 5 of them, covering its basic features of the new system on December 26, 1933. Initially, the primary claim was that his FM system was effective at filtering out the noise produced by its receivers in vacuum tubes. Armstrong would have a standing agreement to give RCA the right of first refusal to his patents. In 1934, he presented his new system to RCA President Sarnoff. Sarnoff was somewhat taken back by its complexity, as he had hoped it would be possible to eliminate static merely by adjusting a simple device to existing receivers. From May 1304 to October of 35, Armstrong conducted field tests of his FM technology from the RCA laboratory based on the 85th floor of the Empire State Building in New York. An antenna attached to the building's spire transmitted signals for distances up to 80 miles, and these tests helped demonstrate FM static reduction and high fidelity capabilities. RCA, which was heavily invested in perfecting TV broadcasting, chose not to invest in FM and instructed Armstrong to remove his equipment. Denying the marketing and financial clout of RCA, Armstrong decided to finance his own development and form ties with smaller members of the radio industry, including Zenith and General Electric, to promote his invention. Armstrong thought the FM had potential to replace AM stations within 5 years, which he promoted as a boost for the radio manufacturing industry, then suffered from the effects of the Great Depression. Making existing AM radio transmitters and receivers obsolete would necessitate their stations buy replacement transmitters, and listeners purchase FM-capable receivers. In 1936, he published a landmark paper on the proceedings of the IRE that documented the superior capabilities of using wideband FM. This paper would be reprinted in August of 1984 issue of the Proceedings of the IEE. A later year paper by Murray G. Crosby, inventor of the Crosby system for FM stereo, in the same journal provided the analysis of wideband FM characteristics and introduced the concept of threshold, demonstrating that there is a superior signal-to-noise ratio when the signal is stronger from a certain level. In June 1936, Armstrong gave a formal presentation of his new system at the U.S. Federal Communications Commission headquarters, and for comparison, he played a jazz record using a conventional AM radio, then switched to the FM transmission. Hey, when I got to sneeze. A United Press correspondent was present and recounted in a wire service report that if the audience of 500 engineers had shut their eyes, they would have believed the jazz band was in the same room. There was no extraneous sounds. Moreover, several engineers said that the demonstration that they considered Dr. Armstrong's invention one of the most important radio developments in the first earphone crystal sets since the first crystal sets were introduced. Armstrong was quoted as saying that he could visualize the time not too far distance when the use of ultra-high frequency wave bands will play the leading role in all broadcasting, although the article noted that a switch over to the ultra-high frequency system would mean the junking of present broadcasting equipment and present receivers in homes, eventually causing the expenditure of billions of dollars. And needless to say, we didn't have quite that much money to spend on our FM systems.
Right.
But again, our radios will only cost about $5 to $10, depending on what you had and what you bought. So. But yeah, dating back to this fun little event that they pieced together for...
I guess I never really understood the difference between AM and FM, other than that AM has always usually been more like talk and serious, where FM tends to be more musical. Yeah. And of course different frequencies, but that's about been my knowledge.
Yeah. The one thing I always found was kind of cool, I remember on a trip back from Denver in the car, and we had a AM FM stereo in the station wagon. And what was really funny is we could pick up, at that time it was KOTA 1380, and we were picking it up just across the border into Wyoming from Colorado. And it dropped off around Cheyenne. Then when we were on the other side of Cheyenne, it came back. And so distance was awesome for AM at the time. FM, like we've seen in the car, we can usually get, if we go down I-90, I think we got around Kadoka, and
right.
It started petering out. If we go up to Custer Sometimes we can have it almost all the way to Wyoming by Newcastle and on the FM band. And then if we go to Sundance, we're okay for a while there. But then if you go up to Spearfish, right before you get into Spearfish, usually it starts to crackle. And I think we've gotten it to stay up until Newell a couple times. But once you get outside of Newell on 212, it doesn't work anymore. It just kind of fades out. Too much static. And so it's one of those technologies that this was all before we had the inventions of iPhones and digital phones and cell phones. And so it was for its time, it was a really useful technology. And people used to before they could afford TVs and stuff, they would sit around and just listen to the radio in the evening, before they'd have dinner. And of course, it also helped them when they had the Roosevelt chats for FDR of the day, because that way they could, reach out to the people and talk to them and share how updates are going in the war and stuff. So, but that's been our fun for the Happy Bud Files, the Wayback Wednesday. And thanks to our fellow Edwin Armstrong for getting his FM broadcasting to work. And we will see you guys next week, unless Sue throws me out in the garbage.
Not until the girl in the garbage.
Oh, no.
Went to go take a bath and somebody's in the bathtub.
Oh, no.
She wasn't in there when we got home, so I thought it would be safe. But of course, she's used to having it at night, so I kind of understand. But at the same time, anyway,
Wow.
good night.
Good night.